Heute habe ich den Jahrestag, den ersten Jahrestag meiner Realisation, dass ich auf dem Autismus-Spektrum bin. Yay! Und zur Feier des Tages werde ich mit euch gemeinsam das Video ansehen, das mich eben zu dieser Realisation gebracht hat. Und wenn du mich noch nicht kennst, hallo, ich bin Sarah, ich bin anders mit Lizenz und ich habe meine Lizenz zum Anderssein im März 2023 in Form einer Autismus-Spektrum-Diagnose bekommen. Und ich freue mich, dass du hier bist und ich werde noch kurz die Vorgeschichte erzählen, falls du meine ersten Videos noch nicht gesehen hast. Ich bin süchtig nach YouTube-Videos. Und ich habe mir eben heute vor einem Jahr genau vorm Schlafengehen im Bett noch irgendein Video anschauen wollen. Und ich habe durchs YouTube gescrollt und habe aus Versehen auf ein Video getippt von Taylor Heaton mit Mom on the Spectrum, ist der Kanalname. Und das Video heißt 16 Overlooked Autistic Traits in Women. Und über dieses Video bin ich sozusagen gestolpert und ich habe mir dann im Bett vorm Einschlafen die ersten 5 Punkte aus diesen 16 Traits angesehen und es war mir sofort klar, oh mein Gott, ich bin Autistin. Und ich habe dieses Video dann ausgeschalten, weil ich konnte es nicht fassen. Ich konnte es nicht fassen. Ich war maßlos überfordert. Ich habe das Video ausgeschaltet, habe das Handy auf meinen Nachtkasten gelegt und habe die Augen zugemacht und bin sofort instant eingeschlafen. Sofort. So schnell bin ich in meinem ganzen Leben noch nie eingeschlafen. Und jetzt, heute zur Feier des Tages, des einjährigen Jubiläums meiner Autismus-Realisation, möchte ich mit euch gemeinsam dieses Video ansehen und dazu reagieren. Ich hoffe, die Technik funktioniert. Lasst uns loslegen.
Today I'm sharing with you 16 characteristics of females on the autism spectrum that are less commonly talked about. These characteristics are based on my own experience as well as those of other autistic adults that I've been spending time with and learning from, and I really feel that exploring these characteristics will help you feel more seen as someone on the autism spectrum. Welcome, I am Taylor with Mom on the Spectrum, and I'm so glad you're here. I started my channel because I am a late diagnosed autistic female, and I could not find enough resources that really helped provide me with the information I was looking for during the diagnostic process. And now that I have my official diagnosis, which I received at age 31, I continue looking for more resources and support to help connect me to other people like me in the autistic community. As someone on the spectrum, I feel that
wir werden das überspringen. Wir schauen uns direkt die 16 an.
So as someone on the spectrum, you may have found that romantic relationships have just been totally confusing to you. You may have found in grade school that your peers were navigating these relationships differently and you just felt kind of like a fish out of water. These are very normal experiences for females on the spectrum. Number 2, this is the thing that has come up more than any.
Ja, also Beziehungen navigieren ist wirklich sehr schwierig für mich. Ich gebe ihr absolut recht.
Whenever I asked for y'all to share your experiences with me. Internalized anxiety from constantly masking. So crash course on masking. Masking is pretending to be something that you're not, put very simply. Women have particularly problematic pressure placed on them by society in terms of who we're expected to care for, what we're expected to put on hold in order to pursue things that we want or need. The list goes on, and this video is not to delve into that, even though I definitely could. But the fact that that pressure exists, I feel like, is one of the reasons that women may feel like they have to mask more than men do. Obviously, I'm not a man, so I can't speak from that perspective, but I do know that women many times voice that they feel they have to mask constantly. This may mean smiling when we don't want to. This may mean pretending to be interested in something that we're not really interested in. It could be giving someone a hug when we don't want to give that person a hug.
Also überhaupt, das mit dem Lächeln, wenn man es gar nicht will, ist absolut ein riesengroßes Thema, mein ganzes Leben lang immer gewesen. Also mein Gesichtsausdruck ist natürlicherweise eher neutral. Wenn ich neutral reinschaue, dann wirkt das für andere oder auf andere meistens grantig. Und ich behaupte, das ist, weil meine Mundwinkel natürlicherweise nach unten zeigen. Ich glaube, wenn das so aussieht, dann wirkt man einfach grundsätzlich unzufrieden, außer man lächelt. Also ich habe mich viele Jahre lang darauf konzentriert, immer meine Mundwinkel ein bisschen nach oben zu ziehen, damit ich eben nicht so grantig reinschaue. Und das ist wirklich sehr anstrengend. Und ich habe in meinem Leben sehr oft gehört, Sarah, du könntest einmal ein bisschen mehr lächeln, lächel doch, das steht dir so gut, bla 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 bla. Und ich habe sehr viele Aggressionen entwickelt zu diesem Thema im Laufe der Jahre. Wirklich. Also wenn mir das jemand sagte, lächel doch ein bisschen, schau auch ein bisschen freundlicher, dann konnte das schon passieren, dass dieser Mensch von mir eine verbale Ohrfeige bekam. Verbal.
Kind of goes along the lines of fake it till you make it. So as the female on the spectrum, you might feel constantly burned out from trying to be somebody but not even understanding who you're trying to be, because that constantly changes based on the people that you're around. Someone on the channel actually wrote.
Muss ich gleich wieder pausieren, weil das eben wirklich ein großer Punkt ist, auch für mich, dass ich ewig auf der Suche war nach, wer bin ich eigentlich wirklich, und ich mich auch gefürchtet habe, dass gewisse Freundeskreise sich begegnen, weil ich eben bei jedem Freundeskreis mich irgendwie anders angepasst habe. Und durch dieses ständige Maskieren und Anpassen an die Menschen in meiner Umgebung habe ich wirklich verloren, wer ich eigentlich bin. Dazu habe ich auch ein Video auf dem Kanal, ich verlinke es dir hier.
Something that I wanted to share, this is from Hannah Hunt. She said, it's like people either expect autistic women to be the 4-year-old boy who's obsessed with trains or completely neurotypical. And I thought that was a really good perspective, because males on the spectrum, I feel like they might be able to get away with a little bit more in terms of different types of social behaviors, but women seem to be taught a more rigid pattern of behaviors that are acceptable by society. And it can be really hard as an autistic person to understand how to fit that mold, and extremely exhausting to find ourselves in that situation over and over again. The third point goes along with this one. That is, you may feel like you're suppressing true honesty in order to make other people more comfortable. This kind of goes along with masking, but a lot of...
Absolut, ja. Ich kann eigentlich nie sagen, was ich denke. Nie. Ganz selten. Es wären so viele Menschen wütend auf mich, würde ich sagen, was ich denke, wirklich. So viele. Weil ich glaube, es liegt daran, dass man gerade als autistische Frau lernt, um sich wirklich gut anpassen zu können, ganz genau, wie die anderen funktionieren. Und man wird irgendwie zu einem Psychologen. Und man erkennt Muster, natürlich bei sich selbst nicht, aber bei den anderen sehr, sehr genau. Und wenn dann jemand kommt und erzählt einem was oder sagt einem was und man erkennt dieses Muster, nachdem dieser Mensch funktioniert in dieser Situation, und man würde ihm das sagen, dann wäre der fürchterlich verletzt. Und ich glaube, ich habe es auch wirklich sehr oft geschafft in meinem Leben, Menschen wirklich sehr zu beleidigen, indem ich einfach gesagt habe, was ich in diesem Moment denke. Also ja, absolut.
Times autistic people can be a little bit more blunt. We are very literal, and many times we feel like saying exactly what we mean is the best way to say something. If you're on the spectrum, you may have noticed how hard it is to figure out what's actually appropriate to share with the person that we're talking to. It's almost like this song and dance of figuring out what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, but the thing that falls behind in all of this is what we actually think or feel or believe or want to communicate. So you may feel that as a female on the spectrum, you've had to soften your honest opinions in order to appease the needs of others and to make them feel more comfortable in the situation. Number 4 definitely also goes along with masking, and that is copy and paste behaviors. This was the first sign that I remember hearing and thinking, oh my gosh, I do that. I was talking with someone about autism, and they mentioned that it wasn't normal to have copy and paste behaviors, and I remember thinking, but it is normal. And That's when things started first clicking into place for me. So as an autistic female, you might find that in social situations, you are constantly observing what other people are doing, and you might change your body language to mirror them. You might change your facial expressions to mirror them. You might change your tone of voice or the types of vocabulary you're using to mirror them. It comes from a different place. It's not necessarily social anxiety. It's more of ineptitude or an inability to understand how to properly participate in the communication going on. And now, even as I say that, I'm like, who?
Ja, also bei dem Punkt Nummer 4 muss ich an Marie denken. Marie, falls du das jemals siehst, hallo. Und Marie war in meinen 20ern meine wirklich beste Freundin für lange, lange Zeit. Und ich habe Marie angebetet. Ich habe sie geliebt, wirklich. Und sie war auch irgendwie ein Idol für mich. Und noch heute, bei gewissen Bewegungen, bei gewissen Sachen, die ich sage, bei gewissen Sachen, wie ich sie sage, höre ich Marie. Genau. Und das war auch so ein Punkt, über den habe ich mich immer gewundert. Und das habe ich immer lustig gefunden, weil mir das eben bei mir selbst aufgefallen ist. Dass ich gerade nicht ich selbst bin, sondern dass ich gerade Marie bin. Und ich habe einfach wirklich in der Situation kopiert, wie sie spricht, wie sie sich bewegt und auch gewisse Sachen, die sie sagte. Und diese Freundschaft ist auch deswegen auseinandergegangen, weil ich eben unbedacht einfach meine ehrliche Meinung gesagt habe. Und danach habe ich nie wieder etwas von ihr gehört. Und das ist sehr traurig. Ja.
To define properly, so clearly there's some more unpacking we have to do there. But copy and paste behaviors are almost a survival tactic for navigating the world of non-autistic communication. Number 5, this is something that I ran into my entire life from a very young age, being labeled either sensitive or gifted, or both. I haven't seen males on the spectrum deal with this issue as much. It doesn't mean that they don't, but many times autistic females, if they're a little bit different socially or don't really fit the mold, it can be passed off as them being sensitive, right? They're shy or
auch dieser Punkt trifft absolut auf mich zu. Also ich wurde gerade in der Volksschule als sehr begabt, also gifted, gelabelt und auch ganz oft habe ich gehört, sei nicht so empfindlich, sei nicht so sensibel, oh, du bist überempfindlich, du bist übersensibel, bla 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 bla.
Just gifted and they're really smart, and so they're a little bit different. But the reality is, if you dig deeper than that, sensitive and gifted are just two terms that kind of cover up the struggles that are going on underneath the surface. Number 6, as an autistic female, you may feel especially depleted after social events or large gatherings. You may also find yourself constantly looking for ways to get out of those events. I never really understood why people wanted to go to these very large events, but I understood that it was important, so I found myself going to them and then would always need a lot of.
Genau, also das war ungefähr der Punkt dann, an dem ich das Video abgeschalten habe. Und auch hier möchte ich kurz erklären, wie es mir mit diesem Punkt so geht, also wie es mir in solchen Situationen so gegangen ist. Ich habe, außer ich war alkoholisiert, soziale Treffen wirklich gemieden. Und es lässt sich in manchen Situationen nicht vermeiden. Und es ist so, je wichtiger es mir ist, dass ich akzeptiert werde, desto anstrengender ist es für mich. Und ich bin mit einem älteren Mann zusammen, also wir haben 18 Jahre Altersunterschied. Und er hat schon 3 erwachsene Töchter. Also mir ist aufgefallen, dass gerade bei Treffen mit seiner Familie, wir treffen uns zum Beispiel zu Weihnachten immer zum Kekselbacken im Haus von seiner Ex-Frau. Und es ist wirklich alles sehr harmonisch. Sie sind wirklich alle offen und sehr liebevoll und ich fühle mich eigentlich grundsätzlich gut aufgenommen. Und diese Treffen sind immer größer. Also seine Ex-Frau, ihr neuer Partner, die 3 Töchter, teilweise mit Anhang. Und es ist mir eben so wichtig, dass ich mich dort wirklich von meiner besten Seite zeige und dass ich dort nicht irgendwie den Weirdo raushängen lasse und dass ich nicht seltsam rüberkomme, dass ich nicht irgendwelche blöden Sachen sage, die ich nicht sagen sollte. Und gerade in diesen Situationen war es für mich damals noch undiagnostiziert sehr anstrengend. Und wir haben eben bei diesem Kekselbacken-Termin uns teilweise vielleicht 3 oder 4 Stunden gesehen und ich bin danach wirklich schlafen gegangen. Ich war fertig, ich war ausgelaugt, ich war so leer, ich war so müde und überanstrengt einfach von diesem Masking, dass ich danach zu nichts mehr fähig war, zu nichts. Und wir sind nach Hause gekommen und ich habe danach unsere Kinder ins Bett gebracht und bin auf der Couch gelegen und wollte einfach nur schlafen, weil ich war einfach nur fertig. Und ich habe damals zu meinem Partner gesagt, das ist doch nicht normal. Was ist denn los mit mir? Das ist doch nicht normal, dass 4 Stunden mit der Familie so dermaßen anstrengen. Und das war eben auch so ein großes Fragezeichen, das sich eben mit diesem Video in mir aufgeklärt hat.
Recovery time afterwards. I didn't necessarily register that at the time, but I remember just being kind of fascinated by the idea that people wanted to get together in these large groups and hang out and have small talk for hours, because that sounds like a literal nightmare. So if you find yourself in these large situations, you might find that you need recovery time afterwards, that you feel really depleted. You might almost feel a sense of depression or lethargy, an inability to stick to your normal routine. These are all normal autistic responses to large gatherings and social events. Number 7, as an autistic female, you might find that you have secret stems. So stemming is something that you do physically with your body in order to move energy outward. So as someone on the spectrum, we deal with a lot of sensory overwhelm, and that can create this feeling of a lot of physical energy that needs to leave the body. The stereotypical autistic stems of flapping your hands or maybe hitting something, those things tend to be more common in autistic males, not all of the time, but many times autistic females, if they have that type of behavior, that seems more socially problematic. So autistic females will revert, maybe without even knowing it, like I did, to something way less noticeable, like hair twirling. I did this all the time in school. Hair twirling or picking at my nails, biting my lip, which is something that I'm still trying not to do because I do it all the time and it ends up kind of hurting. So
das habe ich auch immer gemacht in der Schule, wirklich ständig. Die Haare gezwirbelt, an den Fingernägeln gezupft. Und man sieht es, also jetzt mache ich das nicht mehr so stark, aber man sieht es immer noch teilweise. Und auch Haare auszupfen, Lippen beißen, das ist etwas, was ich ganz exzessiv betreibe, vor allem in Situationen, wo ich eben Stress habe. Und ja, auch ein Punkt, der mich darauf gebracht hat, eben, dass ich wahrscheinlich wirklich Autistin
find
bin.
these little ways to stem that other people don't notice. I also used to blink a lot as a stem when I was younger. Stems can change over time, that's totally normal. But let me know if you're picking up for the first time maybe on some secret stems that you've had that you didn't know were stems. I'd be curious to hear what those are. Number 8, this is me for sure. As an autistic female, I feel like I am much more comfortable and much truer to myself in writing rather than in person. That's not true 100% of the time, but more often than not, I would rather communicate with you in writing rather than having a conversation in person.
Weil man beim Schreiben einfach länger Zeit hat, das, was man sagen will, zu prozessieren und dann wirklich auch so, wie man es sagen will, auf Papier zu bringen. Würde man sich jetzt im Gespräch, im Persönlichen, so viel Zeit nehmen, wirklich zu überlegen, was das richtige Wort ist oder was die richtige Weise ist, das zu sagen, was man gerne ausdrücken will, dann würde man wirklich sehr lange nachdenken teilweise.
In person, what I'm thinking about when I'm talking to you is, where should my eyes be? What should my body language be doing? Is this an appropriate facial expression? And then trying to hold what you're saying in my head while trying to formulate an idea and figure out the right time to jump in and share it. All of those things are so overwhelming. And now, in a way, they are automatic, but it still requires so much brain power to do that it really depletes me. Whenever I get to write out what I want to communicate, I am truer to myself. I'm able to take out all of that extra processing and really focus on what it is I actually want to say. There have been many times where I've written something and thought, wow, that's really truer to who I feel I am than how I actually interacted in person with them. Which is kind of interesting because I know there's been This is a little different topic, but I know there's been some shade thrown at online communication, Facebook comments, that kind of stuff, because people will just say anything and they need accountability. But for me, I feel like I don't type or share anything unless I truly mean it. And I have run into that a lot in the autistic community, that we won't put something in writing unless we feel it's honest and true. And I feel like written communication is extremely helpful for me. So just an interesting tidbit there in relation to the very complicated world of social media. Number 9, you may find as an autistic female, and especially if you're an autistic person with lower support needs, you may discover that you tend to find yourself in leadership positions. This might be subconsciously because you want to participate without being part of the herd. In a leadership role, you know more clearly what your expectations are, the routines that you should follow, the rules that you should be guided by. So for me in particular, and other females that I've heard from on the spectrum, taking a leadership position, it doesn't feel scary most of the time because we know more of what's expected, and we tend to have more one-on-one communication rather than small group communication. Small group communication is hard, y'all. It's just hard. 10, this is an important one that might be hard to hear. As an autistic female, you might be really good at gaslighting yourself. This is something I want us all to listen to. It's important. If you don't know what gaslighting is, it's being convinced that something that you believe is true is not true. As an autistic female, there are many experiences that we have that don't measure up to what our peers are experiencing. So you might find yourself saying, well, she can handle it, so I just need to work harder. She did this, so I can do it too. She doesn't need a break, so I shouldn't need a break. So we experience all these things internally where our body is saying, hey, slow down. Hey, listen to me. Hey, this is way harder than I thought it would be. And instead of listening to those voices, we just suppress it and we say, no, that's not true. You can do this. Suck it up. It's fine. And ladies, it is very important that we start to gently become more aware of these tendencies, to gently acknowledge when we're having these types of thoughts and feelings, and mindfully recognize them and give ourselves the grace and patience to do things differently than the person next to us. This is a long process, but I wanted to at least plant that little seed in your brain today because it's important. Number 11, this is something that came up last week that I was having a discussion about with several people on the spectrum. Having a very rich inner world, inner dialogue, but being unable to express it outwardly. And there's a super funny TikTok that I feel like really relates to this that I'll put in the description for you. But many times as someone on the spectrum, we have these vivid ideas and imaginings, and we can make connections across all different kinds of topics, and we're formulating all of this stuff in our mind while someone else is talking, and then when it's actually time to talk, none of that stuff comes across. I find this happening a lot, even in my closest relationships, like with my husband. I will have something so great to say, and then when I start saying it, I'm like, well, I have no idea where that went. It was really good, and it definitely didn't come out that way. Number 12, as an autistic female, you might find that you have fewer female friends and prefer to hang out with people who are not females. You might find that you do fewer girly things than other people around you, and I realize there's so many stereotypes and generalizations happening right now. What even is girly? Let's not get into that.
Das ist auch ein Punkt, der eindeutig auf mich zutrifft. Also, ich war immer mehr das buschikose Mädchen, und ich habe mir deswegen auch von meinen Schulkollegen oder irgendwelche Sachen anhören dürfen, müssen. Und ich war immer lieber mit Burschen unterwegs, weil es bei Männern erstens einmal nicht so eine soziale Struktur gibt wie bei Frauengruppen oder bei Mädchengruppen. Das funktioniert einfach anders. Das ist für mich besser verständlich, wie das funktioniert. Und ich habe mich immer in der Gegenwart von männlichen Wesen wohler gefühlt. Das hat auch sehr oft zu Missverständnissen geführt, weil die Menschen so viel nachdenken. Also wenn man viel Zeit mit irgendwelchen Jungen oder Burschen oder Männern verbringt als Frau, dann wird einem gerne irgendetwas unterstellt, irgendwelche Sachen. Genau.
Stereotypical girly things, painting your nails, going shopping, wanting to get all dressed up, whatever it might be that's stereotypically girly in your neck of the woods. We won't get into how problematic those stereotypes are right now, but you get what I'm saying. You might have found that your preferences were different than other females, which brings me to number 13. As an autistic female, you might feel really different than your other female peers. Someone had a great comment, I believe it was on my community tab, about going to sleepovers and realizing that if she was going to be having a conversation with another girl, she would spend time journaling beforehand or thinking through her emotions so that she would be able to communicate about that with the other girl because she knew that that was important. So those types of things where we realize, okay, what is expected of me is different than I feel like what I can offer or want to offer or am even interested in. So maybe you have found that you just feel like you're always on the sidelines or never quite where everyone else is. You're always kind of observing from the outside and feeling like an outsider.
Genau, und was auch noch ein Grund ist dafür, dass ich immer mit Burschen und mit Männern besser zurechtgekommen bin als mit Frauen, ist, weil man in einer Gruppe Männer oder Burschen nicht so viel sprechen muss. Da kann es auf einmal auch einfach einmal still sein und niemand muss etwas sagen und jeder macht sein Ding. Das war mir oft viel, viel lieber als mit Mädchen.
14. As an autistic female, you may have found that you tend to excel in school. This could be as a way of camouflaging. Don't create waves. Do everything the way you're supposed to. It could also be due to the fact that school is based off of usually a pretty rigid routine and structure, and that gives you some comfort and the ability to anticipate what's coming next. So you may find that you actually did really well in school because it gave you a very specific framework to work within and helped you manage day to day without creating too much attention. Number 15, as an autistic female, you might notice that you have more socially appropriate special interests than males. Special interests for people on the spectrum is something that you like spending a ton of time learning about, practicing, researching, doing, talking about. And there's a lot of stereotypes of like loving trains, being great at numbers, Rain Man, A Beautiful Mind, that kind of picture. But females might find that we have more socially appropriate special interests. Your thing might be social justice or fashion or computer programming. The list goes on, and males can also fall into this as well. But as a female, you might find that you raised fewer red flags because the things that you loved to devote all your time to didn't seem weird to other people. An asterisk on weird because I actually like being weird and I think being weird is cool, but you know what I'm saying. And then last but not least, number 16, you may have found that you are especially awkward at flirting. That's right, you may find that you have no idea how to receive flirting, how to pick up on flirting, and definitely no idea at how to actually flirt back. What does that even look like? Maybe you found yourself quoting specific movie lines that are supposed to be flirtatious in an effort to fill that gap and realizing that they don't work. Maybe you found yourself trying to flirt with a specific body movement, like putting your arm around someone, and it just doesn't go as planned or feels really, really weird. Flirting can be a very, very difficult thing to pick up on and learn as someone on the spectrum. I've heard many stories from different females where flirting was just totally bizarre and didn't make any sense. Just to reiterate, you can be autistic and maybe you don't really relate to these characteristics, or you can be autistic and relate to all of the characteristics. That's one thing that's so interesting about autism is that it presents very differently. So please don't use this as a diagnostic tool. It's more of kind of an interesting way to connect to other people on the spectrum and learn from their experiences. Like I said, this list is comprised not only of my own experiences, but also from input from many other autistic adults that I'm learning from on my channel and in different communities that I'm a part of. So I would say to you, if you feel like you do resonate with a lot of these characteristics, the next step might be to take something like the Autism Quotient, which is a free online questionnaire that you can take that will help give you a better grid for whether or not you may be on the spectrum. There's also another diagnostic tool called the ASPE quiz that I like a lot, and I will put both of those links. So whether or not you have an official autism diagnosis, ADHD diagnosis, OCD diagnosis, whatever it may be, whether or not you have that, the most important thing is what information do you need to have in order to better understand yourself? And then once you have it, who cares what anybody else thinks about it, right? If it helps you show up as a more authentic version of with a company called Flare. Flare has created these earbuds.
Also die Werbung, die sehen wir uns jetzt nicht gemeinsam an. Also so viel zu diesem Video. Und dieses Video hat mir eben damals die Augen geöffnet. Und es ist so, dass ich das erste Mal Kontakt war mit Autismus, da war ich 15 Jahre alt. Und das erste Mal den Verdacht, dass ich auf dem Autismus-Spektrum bin, hatte ich irgendwann Anfang 20. Und damals habe ich natürlich im Internet recherchiert und die Sachen, die man so findet, die treffen einfach manchmal wirklich nicht die Realität. Das ist auch der Grund ist dafür, dass ich mich entschieden habe, eben diese Videos hier zu machen. Und ich hoffe, das Video hat euch gefallen. Bussi, bussi, baba. Bye.